Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest woodworker of them all? We all have those honey-do list projects that hang around longer than they should. For me, one of the top offenders has been building a frame for this octagonal mirror my wife picked up a couple months ago. So to keep things copacetic, it's time to get this one knocked out. So first up, I'm measuring the overall length and width of my mirror, plus the angled sections. Once I've got that, I'll head over to the lumber pile to dig out a stick to trim and mill down for the frame. Here I'm just trying to rough this piece in half so that I have enough space that I can cut all of my sections from it. After I've cut two pieces down to rough length, I'll head over to the planer and joiner to straighten them out. From there, it's time to head to the table saw. Here I have my general purpose blade installed, and I'm going to set my fence to just a hair over 3 inches. This leaves me a little wiggle room to hand plane out any saw marks later on to get down to my 3-inch final width. Once I have my fence in place, I'll remove my riving knife and install my blade guard. And with my featherboard already attached, I can go ahead and rip down my 2 boards. From there, it's time to do a quick swap and install my dado stack. I'm going to cut a 3/4 inch rabbet onto the interior of my frame for the mirror to nest into. But since this is the first time I'm using a 3/4 inch dado stack in this saw, I'm going to have to cut a new slot in my zero clearance insert. Luckily, that's pretty straightforward. So once I have my dado stack installed, I'll head over to the bench and use my calipers to get a measurement for the depth of cut. And yes, calipers scraping on a mirror sound about as bad as you think they might. Once I have the depth of cut in hand, I'll head back over to the saw to set my blade height, then trim out a test piece using some scrap plywood. Yep, like a glove. With the test being a success, I could head back over to the table saw to cut the rabbet into my actual work pieces. With my rabbets in place, I could again swap my dado stack for my general purpose blade, which is super easy. The next step in the process was to cut a 1/4 inch bevel on the outside face of my frame. I want the bevel to stop right where it meets the rabbet, this way it'll play off the bevels on the mirror itself.
Nailed it.
With my bevel gauge in hand, I can head over to the saw stop to set my blade angle, then check it against my workpiece. Satisfied with the setup, I can make the cuts, hopefully without a cute mistake. With my bevels in place, I could take my workpieces over to the workbench and use a shoulder plane to even out the rabbets. Once everything was even, I could flip my workpiece around and use my random orbit sander to clean up the saw marks on the outside of my bevel. And hey, let me know down in the comments if you're enjoying this more sounds of the shop style of shooting. It's something I've been toying with, so I want to hear what you guys think. And while you're down there, give this video a like and subscribe. It really helps the video out, and I greatly appreciate your support. The last step was to use a number 7 joiner plane to clean up any remaining saw marks along the edges of my workpieces. From there, it was time to cut down the miters. But before I do that, I need to trim all my workpieces down to more manageable sections so that I don't utilize more material than I need to. With my Revolution miter gauge in place and my crosscut blade installed, I'll trim down my 8 sections to rough length. Once I have my initial edge squared off, I can rotate my workpieces, set my fence stop, and trim everything down. With my 8 sections all roughed out, I next need to set my miter gauge to 22.5 degrees, which is super easy with the stops on the Revolution. From there, I can cut my initial miter into each of my workpieces. With the initial miters in place, I'll rotate my miter gauge to 22.5 degrees on the other side, then swap miter slots and mirror the fence. Next, I can mark out the final length for each of my workpieces and align them to the inside edge of my blade to make those cuts. I find it a lot easier just to eyeball those rather than trying to align them to any measurement on the fence. And once I'm happy with the placement, I'll make the cuts. Cutting miters like this is kind of like my therapy, where two 45-degree mistakes meet up and pretend they're perfectly right. To test out the fit for my miters, I'll just use a couple strips of blue tape. Then from there, I can drop in the mirror.
So glad that fit. Let's get some straps on.
With the initial fitting looking positive, it's time to move on to the glue up. So here I'm going to reinforce the backside of those miters with a bit more blue tape, then apply glue to each of the miters before slapping on a strap clamp. I also like to clamp these types of projects down to a flat surface to ensure they don't move or warp during the glue up. So I'll add a few F-style clamps to hold everything flat over at the workbench. I left the frame in clamps overnight, and then the next day I could come back in the shop and use my random orbit sander to remove any glue squeeze out. Now, thankfully for me, most of the miters are pretty clean, but if you do have any hairline gaps in your miters, you can apply a small dab of wood glue and then sand immediately after to fill in those areas. And I actually did do that to clean up some of the edges on the corners, which is what you see me working on here. Next, it was time to pop in my brand before moving on to the finish. Since I'm going to be using construction adhesive to attach my mirror to my frame, I want to protect those areas from the finish. So I'm just going to use some blue tape to prevent any finish from getting in those sections. And for the finish on this 16 miter frame, I'm going to be using a hard wax oil, which will allow the natural beauty of the lumber to shine through. After about 6 hours, I could get back in the shop and attach the mirror to the frame using some construction adhesive designed for hanging mirrors. Here I was just careful not to overdo it, since I want the mirror to sit about as flush as possible with the edge of the frame. A few not so tight clamps hold the mirror in place while the adhesive dries. The next day I could come back in the shop and attach a French cleat hanger to hold the mirror to the wall, and this project was finally ready to be scratched off the honey-do list. And just like that, the octagonal mirror finally has a home. From milling and miters to rabbets and bevels, this frame came together with a mix of precision, patience, and probably too much blue tape. But in the end, it's looking sharp and my marriage is still intact, so I'll call that a win. So if you enjoyed this journey and you're ready to go on another, check out this video next. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and as always, I knew this would work, and I'll see you next time.